UFC 249 is officially in the books. What a card in Jacksonville, a card that we had been talking about for 2 months' time. It finally came and went, and it delivered. Some big news coming out of this card. Of course, the biggest of them all, Justin Gaethje defeats Tony Ferguson. He snaps his 12-fight winning streak. He's now the interim champion, potentially booking that ticket against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And equally as big, Henry Cejudo defeats Dominick Cruz and then retires afterwards. We're going to talk about all of that and a whole lot more here on the post-fight show. I'm Ariel Helwani, joined by Chael P. Sonnen, Paul Felder, Brett Okamoto. All of us are of ESPN. And Paul, I will start with you. You picked Justin Gaethje. You picked the underdog. Now, be honest with me. Did you think it would go down like that? Did you think it would be that one-sided?
No, but I mean, it was one-sided, right? But there was moments that Tony looked like he was coming right back into this fight. The end of the second, I believe it was, dropped Justin. It looked like tides were going to turn there. I didn't expect it to go into the fifth and get a finish there, right? I thought Justin would slow down at some point and Tony would be able to overwhelm him if it went past the fourth round. But I did pick him to win, and I thought it would be the boxing and the striking that was going to get it done for him. And that's ultimately what did it. But I didn't see it going down quite how it went. But I'm so glad that it did. I mean, that fight, as a fan, was amazing. Obviously, as somebody that's been through some of these kind of fights and looks at these guys, I feel for them tomorrow morning and tonight. They're going to be in a lot of pain. But, man, they delivered. And Justin Gaethje is the truth.
Chael, for those that may have missed it, what did Gaethje do so well in this fight to look like that? Perhaps his greatest performance of his UFC and MMA career.
And I'll tell you, Ariel, Gaethje did not look like himself when he got into the cage. I thought that his eyes and his facial and his body language looked distant. He did not sound like himself during fight week. He was talking about, I've only got 10 to 12 minutes in me, and I've got to get Ferguson out of there. Should this go late, you better hope you bet on Tony. He was extremely respectful. He seemed like he was questioning himself. Ariel, I don't believe any of that, even in hindsight, to be gamesmanship. I believe Justin Gaethje not only surprised the world, I believe he surprised himself. And to answer your question, what he did different in this fight, he didn't use a lot of footwork. He didn't go for takedowns that got stuffed, and now he used a lot of energy. He waited for Ferguson to engage. Ferguson had to do the feints. Ferguson did the outside movement. Ferguson ran around the cage. Justin stayed patient. He stalked him, and every time Ferg came in, boom, Justin threw one down the middle. He would usually throw two. But the difference, Ariel, Justin always will play that game. You give me an opportunity to hit you twice, I for sure will let you hit me twice. Let's see who the tougher guy is. He didn't do that tonight. He was very stingy. He was very smart. He got his shots. He got out of the way. He did it all night long. And by the way, he didn't throw any air balls, Ariel. I don't remember seeing a single jab, cross, hook, a single kick that missed. He was able to extend that energy that he felt he had to 24 minutes.
Brett, as amazing as that performance was, and Justin deserves all the credit in the world, we should be talking about him for days and days and days. Hard not to feel for Tony Ferguson right now, right? I mean, the guy won 12 in a row, and he had those fights against Khabib that fell through, and he was ready to go on April 18th, and it just didn't work out, and you can't blame anyone. But as much as we probably should be praising Justin, there's a part of, at least myself, and I think a lot of people as well, who really feel for Tony Ferguson. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Oh, yeah. And I think you can do both. You can be happy for Justin Gaethje, and you can feel real bad for Tony Ferguson. I mean, before this fight with Khabib and Tony fell apart again for the fifth time, you were really wondering what was going to happen with Justin. And, there was some talk about him fighting Conor McGregor. That wasn't set in stone yet. If that hadn't happened, really, this guy was kind of the one that was being left out in the cold. He was sort of next, but you were wondering, is Conor going to get the next shot because he's just this big star? You get the feeling the UFC really wants to put together Khabib versus Conor again, that rematch, just because of how lucrative that fight is. So if he for whatever reason didn't fight Conor McGregor this summer, who is Justin Gaethje going to fight? And now the world is sort of his oyster. I think that a fight between he and Conor McGregor is big. Obviously, a unification bout between he and Khabib. Whenever he fights next, I truly believe 100% it will be against one of those two. So you feel great for him. And on the back end, yeah, of course. Tony Ferguson has had a rough go in this sport. He's done everything that you would hope an athlete would do. He's raised his hand. He's taken the fights. He's done the long way. He hasn't cut any corners. He's had some bad luck as it has all unfolded. Again, we go back and look at all the canceled fights with Khabib. This guy's won 12 fights in a row in the lightweight division and did not get a chance to fight for an undisputed championship. So yes, I feel very badly for Tony Ferguson, and unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get a big fight after this. I think he's going to have to go back in line. He's going to fight somebody that maybe a whole lot of people don't want to fight, like a Charles Oliveira type, a guy who's been on a run, not the biggest name. Very, very tough fight for Tony, but I think he's going to take that type of a matchup.
Paul, I see you shaking your head.
I can think of a lot of other guys ahead of him before Charles Oliveira gets that fight. I can tell you that. There's one guy right here that would take that fight before Charles Oliveira. But this isn't about me. This is about the guys that fought tonight. And I think he will get a bigger fight than that. And I'm not saying Charles doesn't deserve that. He's been absolutely murdering the lightweight division. But I think Tony still deserves the respect of this division to get even bigger than me if there was a case in that. I think he's still in line. And if he doesn't get a fight that puts him right back in there, that would be kind of disrespectful to him. But we've seen that happen before. You're right, Brett, where he might just get knocked back down the line because that's how this sport is. It's unforgiving sometimes. But my God, if you don't give that guy a chance to kind of jump back into the spotlight after a performance like that, even though he didn't come out on the end of it, I mean, you couldn't ask for a grittier performance. That guy didn't quit. That guy was not out of that fight. That was stopped by the ref, who was concerned about his health, which we can't argue that, right? I mean, when you look at the playback of how that went down, he was hurt badly. He was getting busted up. So you can't argue that stoppage. But Tony is, man, I was a fan of him coming into this fight, but after tonight, I'm even more of a fan. That guy is truly in there and is a warrior. So I hope he gets a big fight, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I hope it's not, to the back of the line for him.
Chael, it's hard to predict the future right now in the sport. I mean, there's an event on May 23rd that doesn't have a location yet. That's in 2 weeks. They haven't even fully announced the entire card. But if we could look ahead and let's just assume normalcy resumes, and let's assume that Justin Gaethje gets that fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov. True or false? Justin Gaethje has a better chance of being the first man to beat Khabib Nurmagomedov than Tony Ferguson did against him.
Well, according to Dustin Poirier, Dustin Poirier has been in there with Khabib. He's been in there with Dustin, and he has spoken very publicly to say that Dustin has a better chance than anybody of beating Khabib. In fact, I thought Justin was a harder fight. Now, that's very interesting, considering Poirier beat one and lost to the other. But I think we have to listen to his opinion. When you do talk about what next for Tony, guys, I'd like to see all options on the table at this point. And yes, I am talking about potentially retirement. I've never called for someone's retirement. I'm not calling for it now. I am calling that this stays on the table. Look, Tony has done a very good job, but he has been in some wars, and he has taken some very big shots. I used to train with Tony Ferguson for a meaningful period of time, and I can tell you he trains in practice each day without headgear on just as hard, and he'll go with anybody, any size, just as hard as you saw him go out there and fight tonight. Look, that takes a toll, and I don't think that it would be unreasonable for Tony or any of the rest of us to allow him some time, and that doesn't have to be retirement. There's certainly some middle ground, but a break seems very appropriate to me.
Wow, Chael, I've known you a long time. I can't recall you calling for a fellow fighter to retire. And this isn't a guy who's been incredibly active, right? He's had 3 fights in a year and a half or so. He had the fight back in June against Donald Cerrone, and then prior to that in October of the previous year against Anthony Pettis. Can you elaborate a little more on that? Because one might look at the schedule as of late and say, well, he hasn't been all that active. Why would you say this now?
Well, I would tell you this, Ariel, and I don't think anybody should ever be faulted for losing a world title fight. I don't even think they should be faulted when they lose a main event. They're attempting to get into the 5-round club. Anything can happen in those situations. But one thing that I am seeing with Tony, he's always taken a lot of shots. And I don't have very many criticisms or critiques of Tony. There is more things that I think we could study and learn and adapt and try to pass on to the next generation. But I do have one. He doesn't follow the basics. And the basics on day one is put your hands up and put your chin down. And if you don't put your hands up, you don't take your chin down, you're going to take some shots. And Ariel, he does this in practice too. I'm not trying to kick a guy while he's down. I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to pull him up by saying, Tony, please, let's take a break. Let's take a break from practice. I know how he trains, Ariel. This guy goes in and he gets it on every single day. And I don't even love the protective equipment he uses. I don't know why a coach hasn't grabbed him and had him put some headgear on. I'm just offering you for an example. The guy has taken some shots over time, and the guy may want some rest.
Wow. All right. Well, one man who is taking a rest is Henry Cejudo. He won in the co-main event. He defeated Dominick Cruz. He retires afterwards. What a performance it was. Shows up with that new scar on his shoulder. But hey, he looked amazing. And all of a sudden you say, this guy's 33. The career is all coming together for him. He's a draw. He's a legit star in this sport. He's a top 3 pound-for-pound guy. And now he's retiring. Brett, I know you spoke to his team. What are they telling you about this announcement? Is it a work or is it a shoot? If you don't know the pro wrestling terms, is it for real or is it not?
Which one is a work and a shoot? I'm not even familiar with the difference.
The work is the fake one. The shoot is the real one.
I think it could be both, Ariel. And let me explain that to you. I think it could be real from the sense of if Henry Cejudo does not get paid what he believes he's worth, then I think he is willing potentially to ride off into the sunset. I think given his druthers, he would rather stay and he would rather get the money that he's deserved. But to go back to what you said earlier, and you were describing him as a draw now, I'm not so sure that he is a draw yet. I think that he's been doing great things. No one can deny what he's accomplished in the cage. And I think that the cringe thing and this corny, shtick that he's gone with, I think it's worked well to his personality. He's able to pull it off. I find it entertaining. I laugh every time that he does it. But has it turned into a pay-per-view draw? Because if he really wants the money that he is, I think talking about, and I have not heard him put a dollar amount to it exactly today, what he wants right now. But if he's looking for a big time raise, that's fine and well. But I think the UFC is going to be looking at, are you the big draw that you say that you are? And I think when they really get into it, if he fights Jose Aldo, what does that fight sell? I think that all four of us would really like to hop in and watch that fight. But does that fight sell to a large casual audience and bring in the type of money that would justify the UFC paying Henry what they want? We've seen this play out a lot in this sport. And oftentimes the fighters and the UFC do not agree on that. So I do think that if the difference there is wide, then we've seen Henry Cejudo in the past. He has taken breaks from the sport. When he won a medal in the 2008 Olympics, he was the youngest American at that time to win a gold medal in wrestling. He didn't compete in the 2012 Olympics. I've asked him why. He said he wanted a break. He said he was burned out. So that guy has done this in the past. So while I do think that all of us sort of roll our eyes when we saw Henry Cejudo retire tonight, I do think that those negotiations have to take place. And if they don't go the way that Henry is anticipating them going, I still think he fights because he's just so good. He's 33 and the opportunities are there. But I don't just completely dismiss this and potentially maybe even him walking away for just a short amount of time, just saying that I'm not going to fight if we are this far away on what you think my value is.
Paul, let's pause the retirement talk for a second. Explain to me how he looked so good against Dominick Cruz. How did he get this done? And also, if you could tell me, what do you think of the stoppage? Because it seemed like Cruz was very upset with it afterwards.
Yeah, well, as far as his performance, I thought it was a really, really sharp game plan. He went in there, and one of the things, we talked about in the pre-shows, we talked about how difficult Dominick Cruz is to prepare for his movement. He's unorthodox, and Henry just said, screw that. I'm just going to go in there and chop at his legs and move forward. And he almost did it as if it seemed like, well, nobody had ever thought of this before. And his approach, he didn't care which leg he got. He was just going to chop at him. He knows he's got the wrestling background. If a scramble ensues, he's going to be able to end up on top or end up back on his feet. And I thought that was brilliant. I was actually worried for Dominick for a while there. I was like, man, his legs are really getting chopped out. And just when I worry about that, Dom does what he does, and he swoops under. And Henry wasn't going for a knee. I don't know if you guys noticed that. He was going for a kick. It looked like either a leg kick or a body kick, because you saw as the knee came up, his foot extended past. There was more motion to that knee/kick than was intended. And I do think it was a bit early. I'm not saying that Henry wouldn't have gotten the finish in the second round or in the following round or whatever it was. But I think in that moment, Dominick was defending himself. He was awake and on his way back up to his feet. I don't know what would have happened after that, but I thought it was a little premature.
Yeah, you feel for Dominick because he came all the way back 3.5 years. You'd like to see him go out on his shield, but obviously we're wanting the referees to protect the fighters, and it did look for a brief moment there that he was out. Now, Chael, I'll go back to you, my pro wrestling friend. Work or shoot, retirement. You believe it, or we see him back in the cage sooner rather than later?
It seemed very insincere to me. But I will tell you this. First off, man to man, Henry Cejudo, you have called yourself the greatest combat athlete of all time, and I think that you just might be that. An Olympic championship at 121 pounds, a world championship at 125, another world championship at 133. You got a good claim to it. But Ariel, we're not going to have to wait real long to figure this out, okay? No scenario do we see 30 days go by. If Henry is he digs in on this thing, he will be stripped. He will be excluded from the USADA pool. And if Dana strips him, please understand how that contract works. Right now, if he doesn't like his money, you do have to understand he participates on the revenue. However many people buy pay-per-view, he gets money for. I do think when we start to talk about he's a big draw, don't forget he was the only undisputed champion on the card tonight, and he did not headline that card. He is doing a very good job. He has done a great job, particularly for those weight classes. But as far as being a draw, the way his contract works, if they take that title away, that participation goes away. So if he doesn't come around very quickly, slippery slope. Not to mention, USADA has the right to take him out of the pool tonight. If they do that, it is 4 months to re-enter the pool. I'm only offering for you, and none of these things are in motion, okay? He has the right to market himself. There's some other steps he has to do. I'm just sharing for you. We are not going to have to be on pins and needles for the next 6 months while that division gets held up. If this is real, we're going to find out inside of 30 days. And I don't know that Henry, if this is a marketing ploy, is going to like how that plays out.
Yeah, can't help but wonder what his future is after this announcement. Also, if that's the last time we ever see Dominick Cruz fight, because he's talked about not wanting to climb the ladder. He's disappointed. I don't know if he'll get that rematch. That's another big question that we'll wait and see if we get an answer to in short order. Now, let's move along to Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Francis Ngannou. I mean, not a lot to say about the fight itself. Francis comes out like gangbusters, starches him very early, knocks him out in 20 seconds, and once again proves that he should be fighting for a belt in short order. But unfortunately, there's a bit of a logjam at the top of the heavyweight division. There's a negotiation going on with Stipe Miocic's team. Daniel Cormier wants to fight. We don't know if it's going to happen in the summer. They want it to happen in August. It's a problem. Chael, how do you resolve this Francis Ngannou problem? Do you tell the guy to sit on the sidelines, or do you figure out a way to keep him active until you can figure out the Miocic DC issue?
It's a little bit of a mess. Even if you figure out Stipe and DC, there could be an argument to hold Francis. I know historically there's not a lot of cases where you could see where Dana White has done that, but Francis is a little bit different. You cannot throw him in there with a 7, 8, or 9 guy. You cannot throw him in there with anybody outside of the top 10. Now you're talking about irresponsibility, Ariel. You must put a guy with these kinds of skills in there with somebody who can protect themselves. There is nobody outside of the top 3 that would be a responsible matchup. Francis Ngannou will start you. He will send you to the hospital. You need to be protected. If you're a promoter, you need to wait, or you need to write a big check and bring in the right guy. He is a unique skill set, but this is still the reality. You've got to be responsible with his bookings.
Paul, let me ask you, Francis Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic. Does Francis win the second fight? And also Francis versus Daniel Cormier. Does Francis win that fight? Basically, what I'm trying to say, is there anyone on the planet that could beat this guy right now?
Well, I mean, we've seen it happen before, right? We've seen Stipe beat him. I know he's an evolved fighter since that time, but man, I do think that the championship is in this man's future. He just has the touch of God in his hands, right? He didn't do anything right. Does anybody notice that? He didn't do anything right. His footwork was horrible. He lunged in. I know that's not what his coaches are going. I know his coaches. I know who's working with him. I know these guys in Vegas. They're legit striking coaches. And I'm sure Francis in the room is doing those things, but he doesn't have to. He's one of those guys that can go out there and do everything wrong, slip on a banana peel and touch you like that and just prick your nose and you're going to fall asleep. I think if he rematches Stipe, he might be able to touch him and put him out for sure. But DC is another case. I think with the wrestling, he might be able to get underneath him. But I don't think even DC wants that fight. I think he wants the Stipe fight. I think he wants his belt back, and he wants to get out of here and work with us and have fun. I don't think that's a fight that he's looking forward to if that's what's going to happen.
How do you see this playing out, Brett?
Number of ways. I still am relatively confident that they'll get something worked out with Stipe. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that they're on different timelines right now. You know, that the UFC wants Stipe to fight earlier than he would like to. He has expressed, I think, some pretty legitimate reasons as to why he doesn't want to fight in August. I think at the end of the day, you know, they're going to go back and forth a little bit. These things do happen, and they will find a way to make that fight at some point. It just makes too much sense. It's the right fight. To me, it's one of the biggest heavyweight fights in UFC history, maybe of all time, just because I look at the type of legacies that both these men have. Cormier, you know, I think one of the best fighters of all time, and he was down at light heavyweight for a long time because of Cain Velasquez, and you just wonder sort of what he would have accomplished if he would have stayed at heavyweight the entire time. Now he's there. He beat Stipe the first time, lost to him again. This to me really, and then you got Stipe with the 3 title defenses that has never been done before consecutively. There's so much at stake here. Like every title fight is who is the best in the division, right? But I think this title fight would be who is the best heavyweight of their era. Legitimately, both these guys existed at the same time. Who is the best of their era, because they got to fight 3 times. Winner takes all. So I think that is a big fight. I think the UFC will find a way to make it. And as far as Francis goes, I think you just tell him, you promise him, hey, I know it's not ideal, but you wait for it, because whatever happens at the end of this is going to be a massive fight. Either you're going to be fighting Daniel Cormier because he decides to stick around and he's won the title. You're going to be in a rematch with Stipe Miocic, or both those guys are going to retire, which I think is quite possible. And we're going to put John Jones, we're going to get him up there to heavyweight, and you're going to have John Jones fighting Francis Ngannou, which I think would be maybe the biggest fight that the UFC could put on outside of Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. You get John Jones facing the scariest guy in the world in Francis Ngannou.
All right, guys, before we go, one last thought. We talked about the 3 big winners. We talked about the 3 big fights. Brett, I'll start with you. Anyone else, as far as a winner, maybe even a loser, a storyline, a takeaway, outside of those top 3 fights? The prelims were stacked. We had Bryce Mitchell with the big win. We had the close Pettis-Cerrone fight. Anyone else that you want to highlight before we say goodbye?
I mean, I think it has to be Bryce Mitchell. He really made an impression, I think, on a lot of people, not only with the way he fought and the skills that he has, and just this, I mean, a lot of people, especially on a night like this, when, there's probably some fans who aren't hardcore MMA fans, but they decided to tune on, see what it's all about. That level of grappling is entertaining, even if you're not into the grappling aspect of this fight and you just want to see guys slug it out. I mean, they're going to remember Bryce Mitchell. But I also do want to note Vicente Luque. I continue to be impressed by Vicente Luque. He faced adversity in this fight against Nico Price, and that left hook that he's got is such a weapon. I'm really intrigued with him and where he goes moving forward.
Paul, how about you? Your final thought from the rest of the card?
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Mitchell was hugely up there for me, and I was sitting back and I couldn't believe the grappling that this kid brought to the table. And Rosa's a black belt, a legit black belt on the ground. We've seen submit other top level black belts in competition that he wasn't even supposed to be able to submit. Just super impressed by the kid. His post-fight speeches, the way he handles the microphone, he's got his own personality, he's got his own gimmick, and it's working for him. And also, Kattar, man, that Jeremy Stevens fight between those 2 guys, that was just beautiful elbow, big knockout. So, yeah, Kattar is up there on my list as well.
Chael, final word.
I will tell you, I thought that Cowboy Cerrone really represented himself well tonight. I think the dialogue going into that fight was off. A lot of that narrative was, is this too soon after Conor McGregor? Look, that's not what Cowboy had to deal with. What Cowboy had to deal with was his first meeting with Pettis, which lasted about 92 seconds, and it was very one-sided. He's fighting the same guys under the same rules, just so happens to be in a different weight class. But listen, he closed that gap. I believe he won the fight. Matter of fact, I believe he won all 3 rounds of that fight. You want to know who else agrees with me that Cowboy at least won the fight? Anthony Pettis. I thought that was a very cool move by Anthony Pettis to tell Cowboy, hey, they got it wrong, but I'm going to go over to Joe Rogan here and have my moment. Either way, we don't have to dispute the judge's decision. I'm just sharing with you, we can all at least agree that was a much more competitive fight. Cowboy made some adjustments. He closed the gap of the first fight. And all you can ever do in athletics, Ariel, is improve on your last performance. Cowboy did just that.
Calvin Kattar with that phenomenal win over Jeremy Stevens. Carlos Esparza with a big win. Greg Hardy rebounding from his first official loss back in November with a nice comeback win against Yorgan De Castro. All in all, a great card. And by the way, shout out to our pal Daniel Cormier for being an unofficial cornerman throughout the night. Multiple fighters saying that they listened to his commentary and used that commentary to adjust their game plan. So well done. That was a fun little wrinkle to the event happening in an empty arena. All right, we are out of time. Thank you so very much for watching, not only tonight, but our coverage all week long, all things UFC 249. And of course, the fun doesn't stop here. Wednesday, the UFC is back with the main event with Anthony Smith going up against Glover Teixeira back in Jacksonville. In fact, Mr. Paul Felder is getting on a plane in just a few hours' time to go over there. And then, of course, next Saturday, it's another solid card headlined by Walt Harris against Alistair Overeem. And finally, before we go, shout out to everyone out there who's working on the front lines, all the first responders, we appreciate you so very much. And shout out to all the moms out there. Happy Mother's Day to you all. I hope you're having a great day, and hopefully you spend some time with your family watching us talking about cage fighting. All right, we're done. For Chael P, for Paul, for Brett, I'm Ariel. Thanks for watching. For our entire team, we appreciate you so very much. We appreciate you watching our coverage. Hope you enjoyed UFC 249. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.